It has a long history. We came here in 2011. It's an old building. It was built in 1896. It's a part of an old Harviala manor owned by wealthy people a long time ago. And then their business has died and these buildings have kind of forgotten, and some of them are still empty. This particular building, it used to be the stable of Harviala Manor, so they kept the horses in here. And in the early 20th century, I think 1906 or 1908 or something like that, it has been renovated to be a garage for the Rolls-Royce and their Chevrolet big cars that they used to keep here. I have some old photographs of those cool old cars. Kind of a long building with the garage in the middle, and then there was apartments for the manor personnel. So I think in this room where we're sitting now, and these rooms where we have our office and our demo room and some of our working spaces, it used to be the apartment for the gardener of the manor. And in the other end, where we now have the wood storage and stuff like that, that used to be apartment for the driver, for the chauffeur who was driving the manor people around. I've had the company for 23 years now, since 1995, and originally we were located a bit more south in Finland in a rental space at an old factory, and then about 10 years ago I started thinking that it would be nice to find a more idyllic, a more kind of like a nice atmosphere to work. We were located then in a kind of a town centrum, which was kind of unnecessary for us. We didn't need that around us. We were kind of thinking, all of us who were there working for me, we were thinking that it would be nice to be somewhere, peace and quiet, maybe more on the countryside. And so I started looking for alternatives, possible places, what could be the perfect shop for us. And then after a couple of years searching, I found this building and this neighborhood and found out that this was something that could be available. And so I started talking to the former owners, and we were lucky to be able to buy this building, this property for to be our kind of ultimate guitar workshop ever for us. I've loved rock music from a very young age. I mean, I fell in love with different kinds of rock music already, I think first time when I was 6 or 7 years old, and then a few years later I started listening. I was born in 1972, and I think 1982 I was 10 years old, and a friend of mine, or his big brother, had bought an album, Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast, and he had that vinyl album, and we were listening to that album at his place, and I had never heard music like that, like metal music or heavy metal, whatever you want to call it. I had never heard anything like that, and that was something that was kind of the most powerful musical awakening for me, 10 years old. And then I also started kind of broadening. Within the next years I started broadening my kind of musical taste to all kinds of hard rock and prog rock and all kinds of things, and then wanted to start play guitar. I'm the kind of personality, I'm the kind of guy who likes to know how things work. And so when I got my first guitar, I think I must have been like 12 years old. I got my first electric guitar, and before I even started to play it, I took it apart, took everything, took the neck off and took everything and checked under the pickguard and what's in there to see how it works. And my mother was devastated, and she was like, oh my god, now you've broken your new guitar. But I got it fixed back together, and that just kind of shows that that playing guitar became a very important thing for me, but from 12 years old and on. But simultaneously, I was very drawn into the guitar itself as well. So I started playing guitar, I started kind of learning what is the guitar about and how does it work and what is different kinds of guitars. I started going to the library to read books about those things, and this was in the 80s. This was time before internet, so there was no information available so easily. I mean, I went to a music store and there was the Fender guitars and Gibson guitars and stuff like that, but I had never kind of understood that there are also smaller shops or guitar makers, luthiers who build guitars. It just wasn't a culture that I was aware of at the time. And I was applying to a university to study psychology and stuff like that, but then it kind of never worked out, and I found out eventually about a guitar making school in Finland. There was this small school where you could actually learn to make guitars, and when I heard about this school, found out that such a school even exists in our country, it was this kind of like like a revelation to me, like all the hair in my body was like, and I was thinking that this is something that I have to. I've sometimes said that it's not like I chose to be a guitar maker. It more felt like that this profession, the guitar making chose me, and it's there's been no turning back. It's been kind of feels my dream job and my destiny and everything at the same time. First, when I started making guitars, I thought that this is something I'm gonna do alone. It's something that I'm gonna make guitars as a luthier individually. Like I had learned at the time that there are other makers like that as well. But quite soon after I had kind of established and gotten my first sales, and I started to be kind of get a little bit of a name locally in Finland, like that professional musicians thought that my guitars are good, that they're just that I know how to make good guitars simply, and so I kind of started getting name like that, and there was kind of more and more work coming in, and I started quite early on realizing that I would like to make guitars in a team, but not as a factory. And this is one thing that is different with my guitars, or the way my guitars are made, is that even though we are a team of 6 people, it's not serial production, so it's not like a factory. So it's like and the people that are working for me, they are not factory workers, they are guitar makers, and each guitar is made by one person. So typically a one-man shop would make guitars like this, but if you think of electric guitar companies or factories or different kinds of workshops around the world, if they are bigger than one person, it's very often some format of small-scale serial production or something like that. And typically it would be so that that the founder of the company knows how to make guitars from beginning to the end, and then that luthier has helpers who know how to make a paint job, and one knows how to sand and things like that. But in our case, it's like a luthier who works here knows how to make guitars from the beginning till the end, and that's how we make them. Which is, I feel, there's not right or wrong way to do it, and there's very many great shops that are making guitars in different ways, but I feel that for us, we can give something a little bit different, a little bit more when the guitars are made like this individually from the start. So that would be kind of one aspect. There are kind of different kinds of perspectives to what makes my guitars different. Another perspective would be the special materials that we use that are quite unusual in electric guitars. Like very early on, during my first years as a guitar maker, I found that it's so difficult to find great quality lightweight mahogany that I would like to find something else that would work as well, or maybe even better. And in this kind of traditional or somewhat conservative world of guitars, where people are often like kind of looking back to the tradition and idolizing the way guitars were made back in the 1950s or 1960s, or I found also that it's quite difficult to try to sell guitars that are made from some other materials that being used. And so, but I wasn't kind of scared of that, because I also at the same time felt that this could be also like a design point, or like something that if I just work hard, I could establish my own materials that are different from others. And if I keep on making stubbornly the guitars year after year after year, that maybe people will adapt to it, and maybe people will accept it, that these materials could make good guitars as well, and not only the traditionally used materials. And so I ended up using Spanish cedar. It's a very traditional tone wood or musical instrument wood. It's lightweight and it sounds great, and it's very stable tone wood. Great wood to make guitars from, but for whatever reason it wasn't commonly used in electric guitars at all. But I started using it and adapted it to my guitars, and eventually people started loving it and found that it has like a signature sound, that these guitars sound like Juha's guitars. And another material that I'm very proud of is the fact that we've been able to use from early on local wood materials from Finland. So we're using alder that grows here everywhere in Finland, and we're using Arctic birch that is also very typical wood in our country and in also other Nordic countries. But the types of birch that we use are not so common in North America, for example, which maybe explains why quite rare to see birch tops in electric guitars. We're used to looking at certain, or the typical electric guitar top woods like flamed maple or quilted maple, which would be kind of the industrial standards in a way. They kind of always look not identical, but quilted maple always looks like quilted maple, and flamed maple looks like flamed maple. It's kind of well, I don't like to use the word boring, but maybe something like that. It doesn't have that much variety. Whereas the Arctic birch that we are using, it's not planted, so it's growing wild in the forests, and it's unique in the way that you can't find two trees that look the same. So every top is unique in that way, and I like that, because we are making very limited quantity of guitars, so it kind of seemed like a great fit, that we don't need to standardize the material, that it always looks the same, but rather we can do the other way around, that it never looks the same. So you get to, as a customer, you get to hand pick the top, and it's always different from the other tops. How to communicate, what can the customer want? So when eventually you find your favorite luthier, and as a guitar player you find your favorite luthier, and you contact the guy, and maybe you email that, okay, I would like one of your guitars, and then you've seen some photos online, and maybe you like this model or that model. But usually the custom made guitars like we make them, I mean, you have so much optional ways to do it, different colors, different neck shapes, different pickups, all sorts of details you can kind of change within our guitar model selection, and so how can we communicate? How is it gonna look like, and how is it gonna be like in the end? And this is something that I started thinking about also early on, that it would be nice to have some kind of tools for that. And somewhere around year 2001 maybe, or something like that, and in those times internet was not like it is now. It was quite primitive still, and configurators where you can, choose the specs for your car or for your, I don't know, sneakers or whatever. Today you can do all that stuff, but in those days it just didn't exist like that. Yeah, so one of my partners had this idea about such a configurator, and I went on developing that, and we published our tool that we called the Guitar Builder. This tool that we now have, I think, it's the third generation version that we have now available. We call it the Guitar Creator, and it's made with 3D technology, and you can use it on a Mac computer or a Windows computer. It's a really sophisticated thing where you can turn the guitar around and you can choose all the specifications for it. You can even pick a top from the actual inventory of our Arctic Birch tops. So what you see in the Guitar Creator are the actual pieces of wood that we have in our wood storage, and you pick it to the guitar and you put the color and you put everything, and it's going to be really, realistically, that's the guitar that you're going to get if you decide to order it. And it's quite unique. I don't think anybody else, not small builders or big factories, have such a sophisticated tool. I'd like to think of the guitar making as rather as an enjoyable journey than a destination somewhere. I mean, for me, being a guitar maker and being in a position or having the privilege of doing this work, it's kind of an award in itself, that it's a way to live a good life and live a happy life this way. And so I'm not interested or not looking for growing the company, growing the brand bigger, or in the way that one day we're gonna make so and so much guitars. We'd rather just make this amount of guitars and continue this life and continue this lifestyle as it is. So we're pretty happy with how things are. I'm more thinking that reasonable is better, and that just to make our job as good as we can, so that we make the best guitar every time. Every customer who buys a guitar from us will be happy with what we do and would feel that it's something extraordinary that he or she is getting from us. That's our goal. When I was a much younger guitar maker, when I was still studying to be a guitar maker, I remember that we were drinking beer with the other guys who were studying to be guitar makers, and I was telling them about my fantasy of being the best in the world and being the like going international and everything with my guitars. And I guess there were some of my friends in the group that were kind of laughing at me, because it sounded like just one of those drunken fantasies or something like that. But that's how I am. I mean, I've been very determined in that way, setting goals, and it's not like my goals are not really about competing so much with I want to be better than other guitar makers, or I want to be better or bigger or something like that, but it's more like a competition with myself, like to become always to understand better and to make even a better guitar and to make the whole concept into something that would be special. And after 23 years, I would guess that, you know, there are so many ways of measuring what is success, but our guitars have been sold to most countries in the world, and we have a really impeccable reputation. If you Google Ruokangas and if you see what comes from all the possible sources, everybody who owns our guitars or wants to own our guitars, everybody is like raving about them. Everybody who has played them, everybody seems to like them. And my guitars have been reviewed in magazines in the USA and in the UK and Germany and Japan and different parts of the world over the years. They've been featured in many books, and that ways of measuring success, I could say that, yeah, we're at the very top in that way, you know, we're at the very top of the game, that we have a great reputation, we have a high demand for our guitars, so we have a healthy waiting list of orders. And on the success side, I'm very happy with how things are, and this has also kind of changed my perspective in thinking, you know, over the years. Now I'm 46 years old and I'm thinking of success in a different way than I was thinking about it maybe 15 years ago. Nowadays I'm just more kind of better and better understanding that, you know, success is not something that when I've earned so and so much more money, or when the company is so and so much bigger, and, you know, then I'm successful and then I'm happy. It's more like to be happy is to be successful, and to be able to enjoy what we do is to be successful. And so it's more about kind of living here and now than trying to get somewhere. Things are just fine here now.